good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast and the Midwest, and good morning to those of you on the West Coast. Thank you so much for taking time this holiday, the week before the holiday, to join us to talk about SBA changes in the Franchise Registry. And just a few housekeeping items. Everyone is muted because we have a lot of participants on this webinar. And as questions arise, please put them into the chat button. We will try and address all of your questions. If we aren't able to get to all of the questions, we'll aggregate the questions and send out a response to everyone on the call, or we'll answer them individually depending upon the nature of the question. We are recording this webinar, so please request a recording if you'd like it. And we will also be hosting another webinar the second week of January 11th, with similar content and more updated feedback. So this is a webinar, so you can't see me, but I am in full character wearing my Wendy's wig. Yep, that's how much we're into this stuff. We live and breathe franchising. So let's go ahead and get started. Does the new SBA process simplify your lending business, or does it complicate it? The answer is yes. Today I'm going to cover how the franchise changes in the SOP simplified some things, it created uncertainty, and identify where it shifted risk. I'm also going to go ahead and show you how the Franchise Registry will make the process as simple as the SBA intended it to be, and how the Franchise Registry will mitigate the risks that have been shifted to you. And that will in turn allow your 2017 franchise lending to really be a seamless process with reduced risk. So over the next hour, we will address what's changed in the SOP relative to franchises, franchisor reaction to the SBA changes, and the Franchise Registry solution. Since there are so many lenders on this webinar, I'd like to just first start by getting a pulse on how are you feeling relative to these SOP changes. So there are a lot of people on this webinar, so can you just give me a moment while we wait to get in all of the responses? Okay, all right. What we're seeing now is that the majority of you are uncertain. You're feeling uncertain about these changes. You don't really know what to make of them. I understand, and that's why you're on this webinar, to make better sense of it. The easiest way to illustrate what the differences are between SOP 5010-5I and SOP 5010H is a side-by-side comparison. So in 2016, SBA provided you with determinations on everything related to the hurdles that a franchise uniquely brought to the franchise equation. So let's go ahead and review all of what was included. So SBA provided you determinations on whether a brand's business was a franchise according to SBA's broad, unique definition. SBA also provided determinations on business eligibility. I know that lenders and SBA can debate about this law and sweets brands, but at the end of the day, SBA stood by their listing on the Franchise Registry, and no lender suffered a loss because SBA absolutely vetted the business eligibility, and subsequent leadership changed the position relative to that interpretation. SBA also customized franchise affiliation addendums by franchise system and provided certifications for each franchise. And SBA negotiated streamlined solutions for those other documents that met SBA requirements. Now, in 2017, SBA has provided a one-size-fits-all franchise affiliation addendum, which means that you won't have to wait for SBA to provide their determination. So it's a sign it or don't get financing ultimatum versus a negotiation with franchisors relative to the language that meets their franchise system requirements. So you have a streamlined solution for franchise affiliation. And there have been 3 risks that have been shifted back to you in this process. The first risk that is shifted to you is that SBA has changed their definition of a franchise. And now you must determine whether a brand's business meets FTC guidelines. The second risk is that you must determine business eligibility. So this is an area, most of you probably don't know this, where most franchises were held up for the longest period of time when SBA referred Franchise Registry applications to the Office of Litigation, whereby the Franchise Business Operations Manuals were reviewed, and in one instance, a franchisor had to change their curriculum. And the third risk is that you must identify the issues and negotiate solutions on a one-off basis with franchisors and their other documents. I know a lot of you are on this webinar because you're curious to find out, what does the franchise industry think of this? So the SOP was released December 2nd. It's dated November 22nd, but the broad distribution wasn't until December 2nd. So we're really only a little over 2 weeks in. And this is the holiday season. It's year-end when most businesses such as yourself are busy trying to close out as much business as possible. Therefore, there are a lot of franchisors who really haven't had the opportunity to tune in or are not aware. But we have been educating franchisors and requesting feedback. The first piece of information that we have asked franchisors to react to is tell us, will they sign the addendum without question? Do they have any issues with the addendum? And do they have any issues relative to the entire SOP changes? In addition to franchisors, we've talked to franchise loan brokers, franchise sales brokers, franchise consultants, franchise attorneys, all of the various advisors to franchisors. And the response thus far from franchisors directly who have emailed us or have told us via phone call and follow-up email is that 60% are positive that they will sign the affiliation addendum, but 40% have come back with issues. And those with issues, we are categorizing those issues and referring them to the ISA for future conversation with the SBA. So what is the initial franchise community reaction? Their reaction falls into 3 categories: concerns, positive feedback, and unresolved questions. Franchisors have expressed concerns about the addendum, and the concerns are varied and depending upon the franchise system and the uniqueness of their documents. But let me give you just a few examples. For one, even though the SBA rules have prevented franchise systems from being eligible for SBA financing if they hire and fire employees, there has never been a customized addendum observed that includes language stating that a franchisor doesn't control their franchisees' employees. Many franchisors have expressed outrage that the addendum has embedded a presumptive link of joint employment. The franchise agreement explicitly states that the franchisee is an independent contractor, and that should be sufficient. Additionally, the one-size-fits-all addendum does not provide franchisors with the ability to clarify franchise agreement intent or provide flexibility to explain more details around the process by which these provisions will be executed. We've had franchisors also explain that they don't care about the addendum. What they care about is that they have spent a lot of money creating solutions that will streamline the issues that arise in their other documents to now have to negotiate one-off with each lender. Franchisors that have previously received financing because SBA customized an addendum so that franchisees would not be calculated in the size assessment of a franchisor will no longer be able to obtain SBA financing. Franchisors are also concerned that they might be caught up in business model issues because individuals will be deciding on their own. Franchisors have also provided us with positive feedback. So the addendum has a significantly reduced number of rules that a franchise is subjected to relative to franchise affiliation. There's one franchisor in particular that won't agree to provide option for their franchisees for billings and collections, but since it isn't included in the new addendum, they're waiting it out until January 1st, and they can sign the new addendum without any problems. There are franchisors who have also provided positive feedback because they're happy that there isn't a review time for franchise affiliation. And finally, there are some really unresolved questions. So the first is, since the SBA has adopted the definition of a franchise based on the FTC rule, does that mean that the 7 FTC exemptions apply? Now, in the SOP, they talk specifically about one exemption, which is gas stations. And gas stations are not exempt. They've actually included them in their definition of a franchise. But they haven't even referenced the other 6. Based on the addendum, it appears as though previously ineligible brands, such as 7-Eleven, are now eligible. And was that SBA's intent? Finally, franchisors are wondering if this rule will be substantially modified or eliminated, like the overtime rule, which was recently blocked temporarily by a federal judge. We have a really great representation of small and large lenders, so let's poll the audience to understand, how are you digesting these changes? How do you think these changes will affect the number of franchise loans that you will be able to finance in 2017? Are you uncertain? Do you think it's going to positively affect or negatively affect? Okay. Let's give it a few minutes while we watch those poll responses come in. All right, overwhelmingly, 71% of you are uncertain about how it will affect your franchise loan. And that makes sense. I can certainly appreciate that sentiment. Okay, one more question. How do you anticipate that these changes will affect your internal or external costs to finance franchisees? Do you expect them to increase, decrease, or stay the same? Or don't you know? Okay. Tabulating. 20%, over 20% say increase, and 27% say they'll stay the same, and 40% are uncertain. And only 10% think it will decrease. Okay. Thank you for participating. We're getting a really high rate of participation in these polls relative to the number of attendees. The number one question that we've been asked by lenders over the past 2 weeks is, will the Franchise Registry operated by FRANdata be going away? And of course not. Are you crazy? You have uncertainty and risk. And the Franchise Registry has always solved this uncertainty and risk, and it will continue to do so. I mean, I completely understand why it's very confusing for you. The way the notice is written, it sounds like the Franchise Registry is going away. The SBA has never hosted the Franchise Registry. They've never paid a dime for the Franchise Registry. If there's one thing you take away today from this webinar, is that everything, and I mean everything, you have had access to before, you will continue to have access to and more. So don't try to frantically download as many documents as you can off the Franchise Registry, as we've seen some lenders start doing. It will all be there tomorrow and 2017 and beyond. now that we've resolved that question, let's dig into how the Franchise Registry is peeling apart the changes and helping you through these changes. So this view should be very familiar to you. This is the home page of a franchisor's account, which provides the business description, their NAICS code, industry representation, their funds number, and the contact information provided by the franchisor, which tells you who you should contact and for what purpose. So when we look at, on the right-hand side under SBA, this is the individual who the franchisor has said, send me the SBA documentation. I'm the person who's going to sign it, nobody else. Under the franchise sales contact, this is the person who you would establish a referral relationship with. And franchise financing, this is the person who's going to answer your credit questions. So let's dig into the SBA folder to view how the Franchise Registry is going to simplify your life in light of these new changes. The first uncertainty and risk that you need to address is the question, is the business a franchise according to the FTC definition? Do you know how you are going to determine that? I will tell you that companies spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases avoiding being an FTC franchise. The great news is that our database has always categorized branded businesses as FTC businesses or not. And starting January 1, we will flip the switch and show you the brands that are FTC brands. And for those that aren't, we will tell you why they aren't. The second uncertainty you face is, will the franchise brands whose franchisees you regularly finance or will encounter in 2017 agree to sign the standard addendum? But many franchisors are still digesting this addendum and they're consulting with their attorneys. And the affiliation section will tell you whether the franchisor will sign the addendum and when they will sign it. So as we all know, there's a natural tension that's built into this process. You want the addendum signed as soon as possible because you want a surety of your guarantee. But the franchisor doesn't want to sign unless they are certain that the individual is in fact a franchisee with a signed agreement. Or if they are an existing franchisee, that they're actually in good standing with the system. The particulars of when they will sign will be outlined in this section. Not all franchises are that particular. So for some small franchisors, they'll sign the addendum at any time, even if the franchisee hasn't signed an agreement. So if that's the case, that will also be articulated in this section. Business eligibility. So SBA has made decisions regarding franchise brands and their business eligibility. This is a considerable risk to you as loans without affidavits for Curves for Women franchises were denied. And if there's additional documentation is required to meet business eligibility guidelines, like in the case of Curves for Women, then we're going to add those documents for ease of access. Otherwise, we will mark that the brand is not eligible based on their business model. And this will be determined based on 20 years of SBA decisions, but in addition, it will reference when this decision was made. So that way, you are able to document your file accordingly. And finally, there are risks relative to these other SBA requirements. So there are brands that have comfort letters, subordination agreements, lease agreements, and the like that do not meet SBA requirements. And for instance, the addendum, the affiliation addendum, does not address Subway's lease agreements, which they will not modify for SBA financing for the purpose of real estate unless the franchisee has 5 or more locations. These other documents have been modified to meet SBA requirements. So those documents will either be posted to the Franchise Registry so you know that they have been SBA approved in the past and it will reference when, or it will explain that they do not meet SBA requirements and why. All the documents will refer back to previous decisions made by SBA. We know that you need assurances in this process, and we would stand behind this information by providing access to additional historical reviews as well as carrying them forward. To make sure that you are as informed as soon as possible about the franchise brands that you regularly finance or that you have targeted to finance for 2017 or have in your pipeline for January, you should, after this webinar, put these brands individually into your portfolio on the site. We've had lenders reaching out to us specifically by brand to find out whether the franchisor is willing to sign the addendum. And the easiest way to get this information and to monitor the brands that you care about is to simply add them to your portfolio. It is very easy for you to do. Just search for the brand, and on every page of that brand's account in the upper right-hand corner, there is a blue button which will allow you to add the brand to your portfolio. Once you click on the Add to Your Portfolio button, it will bring you to the portfolio page, which looks like this. And any change to the information displayed on this page will trigger an email to you. So what does that mean? Any information. That means the brand name, the Inc. name, changes in total franchise unit, changes in fund score, adding in the bank credit report, a new franchise disclosure document, and finally and most importantly for this call, changes in SBA documentation. This will include updates to any piece of information on the SBA tab, including whether the franchisor will sign the affiliation addendum, if the business meets the definition of a franchise according to FTC guidelines, business eligibility, and documents to resolve other SBA requirements. These emails will not be sent to you until after January 3rd, so this gives you plenty of opportunity to add brands to your portfolio. You can even sit down over the Christmas holidays or and open up your presents and add brands to your portfolio leisurely, at your leisure. Once you click on the Add to Your Portfolio button, it will bring you to the portfolio page, and it looks like this. Any change to the information displaying on this page will trigger an email. Ooh, I apologize. I'm actually on the other slide. Okay. So in addition, we don't want to overwhelm you with the notifications. So come January 3rd, we will also give you the ability to customize the notifications based on brands within the portfolio and for the site overall. So for instance, if you want to be notified of any new franchise that has been added to the site and has agreed to the addendum, you will be able to indicate that on the notifications page. So let me give you, for instance, Phillips Seafood. This is a Washington, D.C. landmark restaurant chain. They just started franchising. If they decided to sign the addendum, then you would be notified even though they aren't in your portfolio. Just as you have regularly in the past, and you should continue to send franchise brands to us that aren't on the Franchise Registry or don't have their SBA tab up to date. This is a community of interest site for you, and you will get out of it what you put into it. So in other words, this site saves you time and money and helps reduce your risk. Therefore, it really is in your best interest to refer franchise brands, and as some of you have in the past made it a requirement to do business with you. There are notifications that are for paying subscribers and notifications that are free for any lender that has a membership, a free membership. We will send you an email as soon as the functionalities are live for you so that you can get the emails that you want when you want them. So if you want them daily, weekly, monthly, you get to determine. And in the meantime, go ahead and add the brand to your portfolio, and then you can customize the notifications once it's released. If you are on the webinar and you are not a member of the Franchise Registry, please go ahead and sign up. It's simple. Go to the homepage of the Franchise Registry and click on New Lenders. Paul Santamaro is our lender support specialist, and everyone on the call who has interacted with him knows that he is fast and extremely helpful. I get a compliment once a week from you about how helpful the staff at FRANdata are and how knowledgeable they are about franchising, and I appreciate that feedback. Keep it coming. In addition to the notifications, you will be able to search for franchise brands who have agreed to the addendum and whose business model is eligible for SBA financing. You can further customize the search by putting in other criteria, such as the minimum number of franchise units or the minimum number of years franchising. Other search criteria, such as success metrics and investment criteria, are for use by subscribers. It's easy for you to tell what's free and what is paid because there's a little lock. SBA appears to be considering creating their own numbering system. It's not clear yet, and there's only been a single reference to this change because it actually hasn't been written down anywhere. But I have been recently asked by a number of lenders whether they will still have access to the FRANd system. I know that many of you have been using the FRANd system to track financing inquiries by franchise and to monitor the portfolio of your brands. Some of you subscribe to have new brands and changes tracked on a monthly basis, while others just use the free information. So no worries, the FRANds will still be available by brand on the Franchise Registry. The FRANd is the backbone of FRANdata's database and is the only way you can organize and understand franchise brands accurately. To help you understand why this is, let me just illustrate a few points. There are over 250 franchise brands created every year. We add a new brand to our database at the rate of 1 to 2 per day. And over the past few years, there have been 6,000 plus cases of franchisors changing either their Inc. name or their brand name. And some of these are simple changes, right? So a brand called Quaker Steak and Lube, which is out of Pittsburgh, when they were acquired by travel centers, they changed their Inc. name from Quaker Steak and Lube Franchise Incorporation to QSL Franchise Systems LLC as a result of the acquisition. Others are more significant, and they have no similarity to their previous name. So a brand by the name of Sitters, etc., they changed their name to SEI Healthcare Services. There is no way that you would know that these two were connected, and in fact, the same franchise. Hispanic Tax changed their name to Stanford Tax. Same situation, same franchise, just different brand names. The Haven, which is an assisted living facility, is now called Avondale. So since I've been in this industry, and to clarify, I've been in franchising for nearly 2 decades and more intimately involved in your world, FBA, for the better part of greater than a decade, I have learned that the most important part of SBA financing is certainty around the guarantee. So what I'd really like to understand from you is, given the new requirements, where are you most concerned regarding your guarantee? Is it incorrectly identifying that a company meets the definition of a franchise? Or is it that a franchisor may require additional documentation to clarify the SBA addendum? Or is it not being able to satisfy the need to review other documents correctly to resolve any issues related to other SBA requirements? Or Are there other concerns that I haven't brought up, or none of the above? Okay, we're starting to see the results come in. Thank you very much for your participation. And 53% of you, 0.6, say all you're concerned about all of the above. And 3.8% are none of the above. Okay. Very insightful. And I think helpful for you, too, to understand how your peers are feeling, and maybe that you're not alone. So you are constantly asking us questions in a good, very good way, so don't stop, to help you improve both your processes and information to assess and finance franchises more efficiently and effectively. Therefore, we wanted to take this opportunity to share with you a few items that are coming soon that will improve your ability to assess credit risk. The number one question that we receive from lenders, aside from, is this a good franchise, or would you finance this franchise, is, what's the performance relative for a franchise in a specific state? In January, you will be able to access state-by-state success rates. So the map that is located under the Unit Geography tab shows the number of franchise locations that a franchise brand has by state. You simply hover your mouse over the state to see additional information. It will show you the 3-year continuity rate for a brand in a state and the number of franchisees. So in this example, we have Dunkin' Donuts, and we've hovered over Texas. And you see that in Texas, Dunkin' Donuts has had a 92.86% continuity rate. So what does a nearly 93% continuity rate mean for Dunkin' Donuts in Texas? It means that Dunkin' opened 41 locations in Texas over the past 5 years, but they closed 4 locations. And they have 36 franchisees. So this is helpful because you can actually then go compare. What is that like compared to Massachusetts, where they have a stronghold of the coffee market, and they have broad recognition, brand recognition. Dunkin' is still new in a state like Texas, which is huge, to only have 54 locations. So presumably it's a higher risk proposition for you as a lender to finance the Dunkin' in Texas. But it looks like with a 93% success rate, that's pretty high. So certainly you don't want to be that franchise lender that financed those 4. 2 years ago, while at a lender conference, I asked lenders whether they would value the ability to rate franchise brands. On this call alone, there is a wealth of knowledge that you have relative to your experience financing franchises. And you're not privy to what the rest of everyone else thinks because these information exchanges happen over individual conversations. But now you'll be able to learn from your peers based on a new rating system. You will have the opportunity to rate your experiences with a franchise brand, and you'll be able to do it anonymously under your bank's name or under your username. And you'll be able to talk about your experience with the brand. How responsive was the franchisor during the financing process? Or, more importantly, if a loan default, did they even respond to your outreach? I've heard both really positive and negative feedback. Lenders have had to sue franchisors because a franchisor negotiated a side agreement with the franchisee to sell the location at a value that was less than the bank had valuations for other buyers. But I've also heard lenders who have worked successfully with franchisors to have them buy failed locations. Isn't this incredibly valuable information for you to have so you know what to expect when dealing with a specific franchise system? reminder, the free part of this site is a community of interest site for you, and it's specific to franchise lending. So if it's a good or bad experience, you should articulate why, and these comments will be aggregated to educate lenders, and franchisors won't see your bank name, and they won't see your name. And furthermore, we'll be able to aggregate the feedback to provide best practices to franchisors. Before we turn this presentation over to Q&A, I'd like to take another pulse on how you're feeling about the SBA's SOP changes. Okay, we're tabulating the responses. Thank you, everybody, for participating. It looks like 56% of you are uncertain. 11 or nearly 12% are negative, and 32% are feeling positive. Okay, I think we've got plenty of time for some questions. So please enter the questions into the chat box, and we will try and address them all as they come up. And if we don't get to your question, as I said, we will definitely address them via email after the presentation. Okay, so let's take the first question. Do you think that this is the final version, or will there be additional changes? So this is a great question. In conversations with the SBA prior to the release of the SOP, they indicated that they were open to franchisor feedback. The International Franchise Association has been communicating the franchise industry concerns, and there is optimism that SBA will listen and adjust as necessary. Okay. Net, are lenders better off now or before? I think that's a really good question. In some respects, this SOP is going back to the 90s, as I call it, or before the origination and the beginning of the Franchise Registry, when the site was just a list and didn't have all of this other information. There are responsibilities that you now are burdened with, and if you don't leverage the Franchise Registry, you'll have to negotiate one-off solutions with franchisors. Okay, we have a lender that has commented, if we do not have a reliable list of which franchise agreements are eligible, small community banks will not feel comfortable extending franchising funds. So that makes complete sense to me, and that's not the first time I've heard that. And that is exactly why we are maintaining the information and maintaining the list and additional documents to ensure that you still have a reliable list of which documents are eligible and which franchise systems will sign the addendum, and which brands meet the business eligibility guidelines, and know which brands actually meet the FTC requirements. Okay, another question. So is FRANdata determining the eligibility of ZORs, or just providing historical reviews for lenders to review and make the determination? So the answer is both. We're going to, based on historical reviews and our involvement in the process, make a determination on eligibility of the ZORs, and also provide you references to historical reviews. If you say the franchise is eligible and the loan goes into default, will the SBA pay the guarantee? I think that's also a great question, because the other thing that I've learned over my time in the SBA financing industry is that you document everything. And as long as the documentation makes sense and refers to and explains it, that SBA will pay the guarantee. So if you are able to actually, through that eligibility, reference historical SBA decisions, then SBA will pay the guarantee. Okay, I've got another question. Can you please explain how the process would work to add a franchise to FRANdata? So that's actually a two-part question. So if the brand isn't listed on the Franchise Registry at all and doesn't have a FRANs number, we need the company's document. Then we will evaluate it to determine, is it an FTC franchise or not. Then we will assign it a FRANs number and upload those documents. The next step is the SBA documentation, actually going through and determining whether the franchise will sign the addendum, whether there are business eligibility issues, and if there are other issues relative to the other documents, then negotiated solutions will be appended. So there's two parts to that. Working with a franchise that is negotiating fixes to the agreement, is there anything about information that will be available after January 3rd that will help us to decide to move forward or not? So yes, I'm not sure that I understand that question, but let me try and answer it. I think what you're trying to ask is, will you know that there is a negotiated fix to their agreement, their other agreements, and that information will be posted on the Franchise Registry. So yes, you will know if there isn't a solution, the franchisor won't modify a solution, then we will let you know. And if there is a solution, we will also post that solution. Is the SBA's approval pipeline going to be completed, or will franchisors that have submitted their docs already be left without an approval or reapproval? So the SBA has shut down their delegated review, and they have also stopped approving franchises. So you will have to wait until January 1 and the new addendum and the new process, the other issues, and you'll be responsible for that going forward. So SBA is not doing any more reviews until at all, period. They have removed themselves from the franchise affiliation process, full stop. Okay. Well, I think that's it. So thank you for participating in the webinar. Now that you know why the Franchise Registry is not going away, you have uncertainties, you have risks, and the Franchise Registry has solutions. So we are in the business of rating franchise brands, so we're completely comfortable with you rating this presentation, how the webinar was in terms of explaining the SOP changes and how the Franchise Registry will help you navigate these changes. So please go ahead and rate how we've performed on this webinar. And as these are coming in, if you have found this webinar to be useful, please tell your colleagues to sign up for the next webinar, the second week of January, January 11th. Also, if there is a specific area of content that you want to dig into more, please let us know. That way we can adjust and add more content on those points. Okay, it looks like 50% of you are happy, 20% thought it was great. So sorry for not being able to get to some of your questions, but please keep putting them into the chat button, and we will answer them after the webinar. Otherwise, have happy holidays and look forward to working with you in 2017.